Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I can speak here to you about the topic, the integration model in Germany, the pros and cons in view of European policy on migration and integration. My presentation follows the three questions. We have heard it before. That means my motivation is first to describe a little bit the historical and political background of the current integration model of Germany. Secondly, I want to mention also the deficits of the current approach in view of Eastern Europe. And thirdly, I want to have a look at the German model in view of the European policy, the European dimension, the European level on migration and integration. And my hope is that our discussions about the pros and cons of the various national models in Europe will help us to develop our national policies in such a direction that potential conflicts among our democratic societies will be reduced. This is a very important issue. Now, the historical and political backgrounds, they are very important to explain our current model of integration policy. It is mainly based on the reform of the nationality law in 2000, which introduced a modern body of legislation. The former law was in force since 1913, that means in front of the First World War. Now, today, heritage and descent, in Latin terms, this is the jus sanguinis, are no longer requirements for the acquisition of citizenship, but the place of birth. That means in Latin terms the jus soli, and the length of residence. This law was the starting point of a long political process. Today, all political parties are aware that Germany is indeed today an immigration country, a country of immigration. This was not the case until 2000. For preparing such a common sense, the German government constituted the Independent Commission on Migration, which had to elaborate a relevant and coherent concept. A first report was published in 2001 under the title Structuring Immigration, Fostering Integration. After a long and intensive public debate, another important step was made by reforming the Immigration Act 2005. This new legislative framework contains measures to control legal migration, to restrict and to combat illegal migration, and to promote the integration of immigrants. Major structural changes followed for this purpose. The foundation of the Federal Office for Migration and Refugees in connection with an independent Federal Research Institute and a Federal Government Commissioner for Migration, Refugees and Integration. Finally, in 2005, a new national integration plan was presented by the federal government, promoting new ideas and instruments to foster integration on local, regional and federal level. There is no precise definition of the German approach in particular, but following an academic perspective, it could be described, and I would describe it as a socio-cultural one. It is different to the cultural concept based in German's history on the linkage between ethnicity and nationality. Up to the middle of the 20th century, religious affiliation and the mother tongue were dominant factors for defining ethnic as well as national consciousness. Today, German citizens or nationals usually have different ethnic affiliations and frequently more than one ethnic consciousness. The new socio-cultural approach is also different to the so-called multicultural concept, which assumes that people are belonging first to different cultural, ethnic or religious communities and aims to give political rights to each of them. The social cultural model is not oriented to communities, this is a very important issue, but to society as a whole, like the French one, but as opposed to the etatistic French approach, which bans ethnicity out of public sphere, the socio-cultural one aims to respect the ethnic, religious and cultural identity of individuals and include them simultaneously in their whole living environment. Therefore, the early childhood and school education, the training for professional qualification, as well as the training of language skills are the top priorities. I enjoyed the presentation of Mr. Riedel, the importance, he underlined the importance of the linguistic skills. The responsibility of the state institutions make resources available for such integration measures, and these are a great advantage of this approach. Now, what are the deficits? According to the last microcensus 2010, among the German population with around 32 million are living about 7 million foreigners. But the population with a migration background is much higher. 15.7 million, that means about 16 million, have such a migration biography that are about 20% of the whole population. The reason for that is the high number of repatriates, Spätaussiedler in German language, from Eastern Europe. Since the 80s up to now, around 4.5 million so-called ethnic Germans are immigrated from the former Soviet Union, Romania and Poland into West Germany, getting the German citizenship because of the former law of nationality and its dominant factor of heritage and descent. I want to mention that this group of repatriates opposed a challenge also after the Second World War. I want to mention that between 1955 and 1959, about 12 million people were resettled from Central and Eastern Europe to West Germany, and about 3.8 million escaped from Eastern Germany up to 1961, when the Berlin Wall was built. But there are still various deficits of integration. First, the new measures of the National Integration Plan I mentioned before and the National Action Plan for Integration are coming very late, and it would be difficult to regain this lost time. As you can see on the screen, the majority of the population with a migration biography is living in the heart of large cities of West Germany and Berlin. Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne, Munich, Stuttgart, and so on. You can see it, the brown color are these regions and cities. In some residential districts of the great cities, more than 50% of the inhabitants are migrants living in parallel societies. Their ethnic network may help migrants in surviving somehow, but their social situation is actually insufficient. The microcensus in 2010, I mentioned yet, documents 12.2% of the people with a migration background are not graduated. That means they have not finished their school education. 36.7% have no professional education. You can see it on the screen. These data refers not only to the classical immigrants, but also to the so-called German repatriates I mentioned before. the specific problems of their social integration are often underestimated. A part of them is living in mainly Russian-speaking communities. Furthermore, religion is often a direct cause of low level of education, because some religious beliefs are hanging on the traditional role of women in family and society, like some religious branches of Islam, like the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as the doctrines of the Salafiyya or Wahhabism. In my opinion, we need a public debate about the pluralistic character of Islam, about the various branches, different branches, in order to support such theologians struggling for the moderate interpretation of Islamic sources. In conclusion, as a short conclusion of this second point, I would say the socio-cultural model of German integration policy has potentials for the social integration of quite different ethnic and religious group of immigrants. But what we need is more and enough financial capacities, especially on local level, on the one hand, and more willingness of our immigrants to pass their school education and to learn more necessary language skills. Without these preconditions, there will be no success in social integration. Now, the third topic, the model integration in view of European policy. When Germany in 2005 has started to develop a new integration policy, it benefits, of course, from the experience of other classical immigration countries like France, the Netherlands, and Great Britain. The result was obviously a specific approach, accordingly to its own historical, political, and social preconditions. The German case documents that we need in Europe and among the EU membership states, the member states, in particular, more national approaches than a common European strategy concerning immigration policy. As long as all the nationality laws are discussed and decided by the national parliaments, we have first to coordinate our national strategies and approaches for immigration policies by learning from each other. Concerning the immigration policy, there is another political framework available. Since the Lisbon Treaty 2009, migration and asylum policy are not just a matter of national sovereignty, but can also be moderated by the European Commission. During the last 2 years, this new framework has evoked new tensions between the national and the European level, then has solved the growing problems with illegal and or irregular migrations in Europe. One example concerns the repatriation of Sinti and Romanis by the Italian and French governments to their countries of origin, like Romania and Bulgaria. The European Commission took legal action against Rome and Paris instead of accusing the new EU member states of discriminating against their minorities. Another example concerns the support to the EU Agency for External Border Security, Frontex. There is a growing number of irregular immigration coming from the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America into the EU. According to estimations of the European Commission, they are about 500,000 every year. But 2/3 of them, of the illegal migrations, 2/3 enter the EU not illegally, but with legal documents because of the existing visa regime determined by the Schengen Agreement and other bilateral agreements. Frontex estimates that about 1 billion people worldwide from 37 countries have the opportunity to enter the EU without possessing a visa. It's a very high quota, I think. In spite of the increasing illegal migration in 2009 and 2010, the EU lifted visa requirements also for several West Balkan countries. The negative effect was a wave of asylum seekers, mainly from Macedonia and Serbia, without any consequences. Furthermore, the EU Commission is promoting a new concept of mobility partnership with other third countries like Moldova and Georgia. My statement here is clear. In view of the various challenges for social integration, we should not inflationary deal with free visa policy. Today we are discussing a visa-free arrangement with Turkey and Russia, for example. What we first need, I think, is to protect the human rights of the current refugees and illegal migrants. In conclusion of my 3 aspects I mentioned above, I want to remember you. First, the social cultural model of German policy of integration is a suitable approach because of its orientation towards the society as a whole, by regarding ethnical, cultural and religious differences. But the case of Germany also documents that the good concept is not enough. We need also sufficient financial resources, mainly on local level, as well as the willingness to integration and support by the migrants themselves. And at least, thirdly, integration policy is still a matter of national responsibility. Since the Treaty of Lisbon, the EU Commission moderates European policy on migration, but it has to pay more attention to the experience of the EU member states. And this Commission has to fight for a higher level of protection of human rights for the refugees and asylum seekers. A high standard of human rights is also an important topic on the visiting card of the EU foreign policy. Thank you very much.